Emanuel Cleaver.
Oh, how you doing?
The KC legend.
I am doing.
Well, you're doing very well. You secured a win in the state of Missouri. You're headed back to the House of Representatives.
I feel fortunate and blessed that the people of Kansas City have returned me again to do work here in Washington, D.C., and I'm excited about the possibilities for a number of reasons. But, there are some things that I think we might be able to do. There's some things still on my agenda that I absolutely must get done. I mean, getting on that plane as much as I do is not fun, but getting things accomplished and coming back, like the money we just announced in Kansas City for the Negro Leagues Museum, we passed a coin bill, and making sure that the coins are sold on the market to coin buyers. The estimated revenue from that sale could reach about $6 million.
Wow. The
money is matched at home, so that $6 million could be $12 million. Buck O'Neill and I signed a contract when I was mayor that the Negro Leagues would pay $1 a year in lease rate, and as of today, I haven't gotten any of my money. They owe me $21. And so when I announced that, I asked Bob for the check. And still, I want the radio audience to understand, he still hasn't paid me.
You see how they do when it's your money is that little stankin' $21, you
know? Emanuel Cleaver, you mentioned that you have unfinished business here in the town. Can you give us a little insight onto what that is on your agenda?
Well, unfortunately, this is not that significant, but it is in terms of morale. Every state that has had a president, most of the presidents that come from Ohio and Virginia, but over in the House of Representatives, there's a statute. Except Missouri, we've had a president. His name was Harry Truman. So the way the law works, I had to go out and raise $300,000 to build the statute. I had to move one of the statues out. We have two statues in there right now. People haven't heard of one of them for sure. Francis Blair. Nobody who's listening to your show could tell you who Francis Blair is. Now, Thomas Hart Benton is another thing. We have a street named after him in Kansas City, and he's well known all over the country. But we've raised the money. We have gotten all of the legal stuff out of the way, and probably in the spring we will bring Harry Truman's statue from Missouri here to the Capitol. It'll be a big deal for. I'll be long gone and dead. Nobody will even know what happened to get him there. But it's important that people from Missouri, especially our community where Harry Truman was raised in Independence, his house is still standing out there in Grandview, and can feel some pride. But on a more substantive issue that can impact people's pocketbooks, I'm going to become the chair of the Housing Subcommittee, the committee to which the Department of HUD must report. I was born in the shack. I didn't live in a house with running water or indoor plumbing until I was 7. Then we moved into public housing. But I wanted to be the head of this committee, not just what I might be able to do for Kansas City, although housing has been a big deal in my lifetime. I started the project to build a housing development called Citadel, and I'm very proud that every time I drive by there. But housing is so critical to our happiness. Statistics show that the overwhelming majority of people in prison don't own a home. So there's a correlation. Owning a home gives you that feeling of somebodyness. You got something. The problem is that the cost of homes, like right now in Kansas City, the average home price $197,000, $800. And in KCK, it's a little bit lower. But if you're making minimum wage, or if you're making $20,000 an hour, paying for a $200,000 house, which is what it comes to, is going to be impossible. We haven't had a chair in Kansas City of a congressional committee since the death of Dick Bowling way back in the 1980s. It's important to me, and I think we will be able to do some things around the country. We got to deal with the whole issue of public housing. There was somebody on TV talking about he's done more for black people than any president. He hadn't done more than some of the school teachers from Central and DeSale, but that's another issue.
Hello.
But greatest president for African Americans, and by the way, Abraham Lincoln did not set slaves free in Missouri. It's important for you to even know that. Abraham Lincoln, he signed what's called an executive order. It did not impact Missouri because he had made a deal that if Missouri and Kentucky would stay in the Union and instead of joining the Confederacy, that they could keep their slaves. This is a 100% fact if anybody can disprove that, I give them $1,000. I'm saying this on the air. The issue for us, I think, is Lyndon Johnson created HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, and it has been decimated. He did that in 1965. Well, Nixon came in and put a moratorium on construction of public housing, and then Reagan and Clinton, all they did is committed themselves to this replacement housing. In other words, you tear down one public housing, you got to build another. But people are still in trouble. People are still struggling, particularly with the COVID-19 having done us in. If you saw the houses I've lived in, and the unit I lived in the Rosewood Public Housing Department, I'm from Texas. I was born 26 minutes from the Omni Hotel in Dallas, Texas. I'm committed to housing, and I'm going to do everything I can, not only just try to deal with housing in Kansas City, but for around the country.
Talking with Congressman Cleaver, represent the 5th District since 2005. You've seen a lot in Washington, work with different presidents, including the sitting president, Donald Trump. What have your thoughts been about his accusations of fraud with the vote counting process? 4 different networks shut him off in the middle of his speech because he was saying things that were not true or that he could not prove. You don't make allegations like that. And I think that all you have to do is call Kansas City United States Federal Courthouse, ask them how many cases of voter fraud they prosecute on an annual basis, and it's below 1, probably 0.19999, nothing. And when you say that kind of thing, that it's being stolen, you damage democracy. You cause people to lose faith in democracy because, unfortunately, in our country right now, we have 2 different realities, and that is we have a whole system that's been designed around a network, for example, and they do alternative facts. There's no such thing, of course, as alternative facts. Millions and millions and millions of people will believe that. The last thing you do in America, if you love the country, is try to cause people to lose faith in democracy because you want as many people to come out and vote as possible. Then make no mistake, and you're going to hear Biden say this over and over and over again over the next few years, that he owes his presidency to African Americans. I was campaigning for him in Iowa in February in the ice with John Kerry. We were on a blue Biden bus riding up and down the highways of Iowa. At that time, we thought a big crowd for us was 25 people. And then when Jim Clyburn came out just as the primary was hitting South Carolina and endorsed Joe Biden, it turned things around. He became the nominee.
Representative Cleaver, we got people engaged for the most part in the presidential election, but how do we keep people engaged?
Well, let me just say, I really appreciate the Carter Broadcasting because, this is the most extensive interview that I'm probably going to do. Now, I'm going to be on Fox a little later on the day and probably before the week is over on a number of the other networks. But what we have to do is to keep the issue in front. We don't talk about the next election until it's time for the next election. And I think it's too late. We've got to show people the impact of elections. Now, people don't think it. When I was elected mayor, I was able to get some money from Bill Clinton because I was involved in that election and built the South Midtown Roadway. Now, I was able to get the city council when I was mayor to change the name to the Bruce R. Watkins. But all of that is politics, and we got to make sure people understand how things happen. I mean, they don't just happen. They happen by politics. And so they have to be engaged. They have to vote for people who are going to make dramatic changes in our community because the most important election coming up is in 2 years. When we lose the state elections, state legislators and state senators, it means that they do the redistricting. They draw the lines from which I am elected. And all of the members of Congress are elected based on the lines they're going to draw down in Jeff City in the state legislature. Most people will get out, or many will get out and vote in the presidential, but in the state they don't understand the significance. Every 10 years, the state legislature draws the lines, and as anybody in the country will tell you, anybody, Republican, Democrat, the lines have been gerrymandered. My district right now runs from Marshall, Missouri, believe it or not, all the way down to Excelsior Springs. It includes Concordia and Odessa and Sweet Springs and Oric and Richmond and Slater and Mayview. So that's not the way it looked when I first got elected. And so they try to draw the lines. If you're not at the table, the Republicans will draw the lines, and they're going to draw them in ways in which
that's how I can win. It's not an attack on Republicans. It's a fact. Thank God for what you guys are doing right now. It's this kind of thing that you guys do that some others need to do as well.
Some of our listeners had doubts about Joe Biden as the next president. Things came up in his past, the crime bill, things that he said that may have been gaffes from someone who has had close proximity to him. What would you say to people who have had issues and qualms about Joe Biden?
Joe Biden, next to my grandpa Henry Barton, is a white guy who has as little or no biases. He grew up in a steel mill town up in Scranton and then moved down to Delaware. I don't know if you guys remember when Swope Park used to have segregated swimming pools down there in Swope Park. Well, back in that day, Joe Biden would have been a lifeguard at Swope Park because he didn't want to go to the white swimming pool. He wanted to hang out with black folk. Now, I got so angry when people were talking about that crime bill because most people who were talking about it don't even know. I was in Kansas City. I was a pastor of a church. And first of all, most of the Black Caucus members supported it. And most of the mayors, I was the president of the National Conference of Black Mayors at the time, and we supported it. And back in the 1980s, right up to the 90s, we had gang wars all over this country. In Kansas City, we had a Jamaican gang, we had a Nigerian gang, we had the Bloods and the Crips. We had drive-by shootings every day, which we don't have anymore. We too many murders, but back then it was the gangs driving by and shooting. I did a funeral at St. James United Methodist Church over there, 5th and Paseo, with two brothers who had been shot, and they in the same casket. It's one of the most painful days of my life. Everybody was demanding, you guys better do something. You guys need to do something. And so the result was the crime bill that black people supported, that Latinos supported. Later on, somebody came up with this notion that if you supported the crime bill, you were a bad person and against black people. And most of the black people in the country supported it. If you know people who were around in the 80s and 90s, they can tell you about the drive-by shootings every day. I thought that was unfair about to Joe. Joe Biden's national chairman of his campaign is a black man, Cedric Richmond from New Orleans. If you go into his office, it's packed with black people. And you talk to the black people in Delaware where he lives, I mean, they'll tell you, Joe Biden, I don't want to get him in trouble. He hang out with black people more than he hang out with others. And every year I've gone to his Black History Party, and nobody's there but Joe Biden and Jill Biden and black people. And he won't let you go home. It's, sometimes black people like to party all the way into 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And so Joe Biden is one of them. So, well, Mr. President, I guess I better be going. Yeah, but let me tell you about this time when I hit this home run. And of all the things that happened, all the things that Donald Trump said about it, the worst thing, the most painful thing to him and the most painful thing to those of us who know him, well, he supported the crime bill. He says, now, it was a mistake. I think all of us, if we had known what was going to happen, particularly with the 3 strikes and you're out and prison for life, we wouldn't have done it. Like right now, people saying, we got this crime rate running up everywhere in the country. In Kansas City, that's all people are talking about, crime and crime and crime. Most of the federal government doesn't get involved in that. That's the police and the city council and the mayor. But back then, they said, the government needs to do something. What did the government do? Pass the crime bill, and everybody was cheering.
Thank you for putting that perspective on the crime bill. We really appreciate your time, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what you're doing with the affordable housing that's on your platform.
All right, looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you, Representative Emanuel Cleaver. Have a good one.